Hello, I'm going to show you how to use HDR Light Studio with Houdini and Redshift. We've got this radio scene, and it's got the model and the materials and the camera, but there's no lighting whatsoever. So let's use HDR Light Studio to light this Redshift shot. We go here and press Tab, Digital Assets, HDR Light Studio Connection, and make one of those. And then when you have it selected, we can see the controls to start HDR Light Studio and work with HDR Light Studio. So the first thing we need to do is to pick the renderer Redshift, because that's what we're using for this project. There's no lighting in the scene, but rather than make a dome light and connect to it, the connection can do that for us. So all we need to do now is, now we know the renderer is Redshift, we'll press Start. It will see that there's no lighting in the scene in the form of a dome light, and it will offer to create a new hook. So I'll press OK, and then HDR Light Studio will start, and a Redshift dome light will also be created and connected. So if we go back to Houdini, we can see the dome light, and if we look at the shader, we can see that it's pointing to a temporary EXR file generated by HDR Light Studio, and we'll keep updating those as the lighting evolves. So let's go back to HDR Light Studio and press the play button in this view, and we will then import the scene into HDR Light Studio so that we can light paint. Light painting is where basically any light that you make, you can click on the model and drag in HDR Light Studio to move its position, and we call this light paint. And it means you have total control over where you want to put the light by interacting with the view directly. So I'll get rid of that light. And let's create a picture background, and we'll go to our presets, and I've saved some HDR images actually, element images, HDRI maps, and because in HDR Light Studio now you can store your own presets, I have a few purchased HDRI maps here, and I can just quickly swap those out and try them out. So what we need to do now is actually in Houdini, go to the render view and render using the Redshift IPR, and make sure we've got the correct camera chosen. Okay, so I'll just drag that so we can just see the radio. Go back to HDR Light Studio. Now I'd normally have HDR Light Studio on my second display, so for the purposes of recording this video, everything is on this single display. So yeah, as you can see, as I drag and I drop the different HDRI maps that I've stored, you can see that it updates in HDR Light Studio and updates instantly inside of Redshift and Houdini. So in terms of these maps, you can rotate them using the longitude slider. But what we're going to be better to do is to actually start to light this shot properly. So I'll leave this in as a bit of a kind of ambient background lighting, but I'll make it quite dark, so I'll turn that down. There we go. Right, so HDR Light Studio comes with a lot of preset content. So if we go to Lights, and then let's say pick Studio Lights in the list here, Studio Lights, then we've got a whole load of lights that we can use. So I'm going to get one of these tracing paper lights here and drag and drop that onto the model. So you can see here that as I move this light around, it moves it around the HDRI map. When I let go, that map is then updated and sent to Houdini. So everything's live inside of HDR Light Studio, but it updates less frequently inside of Houdini, because otherwise we'd be sending hundreds of HDRI maps and overloading Houdini with all the updates. So this light at the moment is on the HDRI map, but you can make this into a 3D light source, which I'm going to do now, a 3D area light. So on the properties of the light, there is an area light checkbox. I'm going to enable this. Now initially things don't change that greatly, but that light has been removed from the HDRI map and is now, that individual light has been built as an emitter, a Redshift Area Light basically. So if I use the Smart Dolly slider, I can drag that to bring that light closer to the model. And I'll change its brightness. So I'm using the plus and minus buttons on the brightness slider, and they're really useful because using the plus, it will double the brightness. It's like raising the brightness by 1 f-stop. So I find those really handy. And I'm going to scale the light. So I've just dragged out this control here, this panel, the light controls panel. And if I click and keep my finger down and I drag, you'll see that that light is now scaling and getting larger. So I want that light to be more around the side here. Now if I start to take that light to this corner, you'll see that the light is always pointing directly at the light paint position. And if I was to take it round to the top, it's pointing downwards like that. Now you may want the light to always be pointing straight upwards, and we can do this by going to the transform extended section and turning the advanced rotations on and doing vertical lock. And now wherever I put that light, it's always going to be vertical. So I'm going to bring that light round here. And then I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to bring a light around here. So already you can see here that this is starting to look quite nice. We're getting some very natural looking lighting. So I think as a kind of starting point for the lighting, those two lights look really quite nice. If you was to turn off that ambient lighting and just see the light from those two area lights, and then you'll see that the fact that the lighting is quite close to the model, it has quite a different feel. So if I was to take both of these lights and uncheck the area light so that they returned back to the HDRI map, you'll see the lighting has a very different quality because the lights are a long way away. They're kind of almost at infinity. So the whole model gets to see the light coming from the HDRI map. When the lights are area lights and they're more localized, you get a much different feel to the lighting. Right, so I like what's happening with this reflection here, and I like what's happening here. The only thing is the way this light kind of cuts off at the top and the bottom, it's a bit harsh. So I think I'm actually going to change the content of this light, but I'm going to leave this one because I quite like that, the way the light source there is visible in that reflection. It makes it quite nice. The only thing I might do is soften the edges of this light so I don't get that hard edge. But the first thing we'll do is let's have a look at this light here. I can solo it. And I'm going to basically replace that light's content. So the great thing about the presets in Light Studio is I can go content and let's say box grads for the box gradients, and then I can just drag and drop the appearance. So if I drag that and drop that, I've now replaced that content with this this appearance here. And even after I've dropped it, everything is editable within that. So we can make this even softer looking. So if I go to the front view of the light here, and you can see how that's changing. So I quite like the softness of that light. I'm just going to make it a bit taller. So I'm going to click, keep my finger down and then drag, and then that light is going to get taller. And then unsolo that so we can see the other light on the other side. So for this light, I like the character of it. I like the fact I can see that light source, but I want to soften the edges. So in here, I'm going to use alpha multiply section of the content. And I'm going to use a box grad gain to soften it. So I will drag and drop onto here. And then I can use these sliders here, these values on these ramps here, to just change how soft that is. So I'll keep the bottom like that, but it's that top part I want to just soften off. So if we see here now, if I was to turn off this alpha multiply, and we can see that hard edge going all the way up to the top and kind of creeping around the edge there. But if I turn back on this setting here, this box gradient that I've dragged and dropped, and these settings that I've tweaked, you can see it's really nice because we've got like this softness to the edge of the light there. So I think that looks really good. I'm going to brighten that a bit now. Great. So what I want now is something to bring the front of this radio alive. It's looking really flat at the moment. So let's go and find another light. Pick Studio. And let's drag down. And this one that's kind of cut in half, I'm going to use this one. So I'll drag that and I'll drop that onto the model here. I'm going to turn that into an area light, and then I'm going to bring that close and then kind of scale it away. Now at the moment I've got reflection mode for light paint, so wherever I drag it will reflect in that location. If I want to put a light just parallel to this surface which is flat, it's handy to use the illumination mode, and then wherever I click it's going to basically go through the normal and face that surface straight on, which is really handy. And then you can see here that the area light is coming between the camera and the subject. So you could either dolly that so it goes behind the camera and then you don't see it, or if you want it between you and the camera, which is kind of impossible in the real world, but real in the CGI world, we can turn off camera visibility. But then you can still see the reflection of that light. So I'm going to make that a bit more intense in brightness. And I'm just going to drag that downwards. And then I'm going to scale it and make it wider. I'm going to bring it down even more. So I really like that we've got that bit of life coming in across here and making everything look really nice. I think we need a bit more happening on the lighting on the handle and particularly on this top edge. So what I might do is get a nice big softbox. Drag that. Make it into an area light. Bring that relatively close. And then enable advanced rotations, and this time we're going to put a horizontal lock on there. Now there's quite a lot going on, and I'm going to isolate what this light is doing by soloing it. So then I can use that edge and drag on that edge to position that light, but it will always stay horizontal because I've got the horizontal lock on there. So there it goes on there. And then I'm going to make that pure white and then scale the width of that. So that's looking nice, but I'd actually like a little bit more character in this light because at the minute that is looking quite flat. So I'm going to use presets to do this. So I'm going to go to Content Gradients, and then I'm going to turn on the Value Blend section of this light. Change the blend mode to multiply and then drag and drop this gradient onto there. And I'm going to go into this and just adjust the fall off on here. So we've kind of got this nice hot spot. And you can see the great thing is every single change I make, it's updating here, but it's also updating on here. So you can actually see how that appearance is changing. So now I've got that softbox, which has got this hot spot in the middle, and then I can go and increase the brightness on that. But I've got a far more interesting character on there. And then I'm going to scale the depth on there. Okay, so that's looking nice. So if I unsolo and get all the other lights turned back on, that's starting to look quite nice. We've got that bit of a highlight running on the top. We've got this bit of interest in the front. Now, I want to create a little bit more excitement in this surface here. So I'm going to get another studio light, which will be a window. So let's just go straight to the windows. And I'll drag and drop that window on there. Put that in reflection mode on light paint. Make it into an area light and then dolly that closer. And then I'll scale that up a little bit. But I'm going to hide that from the camera, so cam visibility turned off. Increase the brightness. There we go, and that's looking nice. I think it's a little bit bright, so I'm going to take down that a couple of stops actually. So that's looking nice. I think this bottom bit is looking a bit boring. I feel like we need something on this edge, so I'm just going to make a soft round light. So I'm just going to use a light from the toolbar rather than the preset. So I'm just going to click on the round light and then click on this edge here. Turn that into an area light and bring that close. Scale it away. Brighten it up. So you see that light pointing here. And I think I might try and get something happening on this edge here. So what I can do in this view is I can actually zoom into a region. So if I zoom into there, and then I'll duplicate this round light that's making the highlight down here, and I'll go back to light paint and I'll click on here. So you can see I'm just moving that light onto that detail. And then I'll brighten that up a bit, give it a bit of a ping. I'll duplicate my light again. See if we can get something interesting happening on the handle here as well. And I have, but if anything, it's a bit too bright, so I don't really like that. I'll try and bring something on this handle over here. So get light paints and bring that just around there and turn that down. So finally, I think this is looking pretty nice. I just want something more interesting happening towards the bottom. I'm going to use a gradient light, and I'm going to position it here. I'm going to make it into an area light and bring it closer. Then I'm going to move the handle on the light to the bottom edge of the light. So then when I scale the light, it scales upwards from the bottom, so it doesn't just go through the floor. And then I'm going to make that wider. Hide it from the camera. And then I'm going to go to my presets, gradients, and drag and drop this one so it goes from dark to light. And brighten that up a bit. And if I isolate this light I've just made, you can see I've basically got a light giving this kind of bit of an uplight effect onto the model there, which is exactly what I wanted. So I'm really happy with that. So I'm just going to take down the brightness on that. Now, we include some image masks with Light Studio, which can be handy. So if I go to Content Images, then mask. On this light, I can use this content because I quite like the idea of having this like a bit of a triangle going from this corner to this corner. So you've kind of got this little bright bit here, which will balance nicely with where the window is up here. So I've got these masks, and in there there's some triangle shapes. So if I go to alpha multiply and turn that on, and then let's drag this triangle with a bit of a curve on it, and then we've created this cut across the light, which is perfectly creating that interesting shape in the corner. Exactly what I wanted, so that's great. So if I unsolo that light, now all the lights are going to turn on. And I think basically just make that a little bit brighter from the bottom there. And I'm happy with that. So the final step in the process is to press the HDR button to open up the production render. We will render the HDRI map at just 1500 because it's just going to be black actually, because with all of this lighting is coming from area lights. We'll make the resolution of each area light 3000 pixels. And then we'll just call this radio lighting and press render. So what's going to happen now is all these individual area lights are going to be rendered at high quality with subsampling at the high resolution, and Houdini will be updated to point to those files on disk that we're generating now. That means we can then stop HDR Light Studio, and Houdini is simply pointing at EXR files on disk to use on the area lights that we've built in Houdini. So I'll go back to Houdini. I'm going to click on the HDR Light Studio connection controller and press stop. HDR Light Studio is now stopped. The great thing is, if we wanted to start HDR Light Studio again, the lighting project we just worked on is embedded in this controller. So that it's embedded within the scene, which is really handy if we decide we want to edit that lighting. And we can see, I'll just zoom out of here, that all those area lights that we built in HDR Light Studio have been built inside of Houdini. And if I was to pick one, we can see that the radio lighting -3, this is just one of the EXR files that HDR Light Studio has just generated and that Houdini is now using for those area lights. So if I just open this up a bit, you can see that we've gone from no lighting at all, and then we've used HDR Light Studio to generate some really nice lighting really quickly using the new updated Houdini connection with support for Redshift and for area lights. Thank you for watching.